Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it's the post-game podcast for the Timberwolves' dominant win over the San Antonio Spurs on Sunday for their sixth win in the last 7 games. We'll talk about a couple of players, role players, who stepped up and had massive games in this one, plus another solid Anthony Edwards offensive performance as the Wolves pulled away late. We'll break the whole thing down. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is sponsored by Robinhood Gold. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. The Wolves went 2-0 this weekend, beating the Lakers on Friday night and the Spurs on Sunday, the 2 games added to the schedule due to the NBA Cup. So really fun game on Sunday. Actually, both games were fun games. Sunday against the Spurs, the Wolves jumped out to an early lead. They led by as many as 18 in the third quarter and then kind of had to hold on. It got down to a 3-point game early in the fourth, late in the third, early in the fourth, and they pulled away late. We'll talk about what happened. There were some strong performances by the stars. You know, Rudy had some moments. Julius, Randle was a little bit up and down, but there were a couple of role players that played really key roles, I guess, in this game. And so I really want to kind of start there. We'll talk about kind of the game flow a bit. We'll get to studs and duds later, but a lot to unpack in this one. So that's what we got on tap for you today. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder of the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter. You can sign up for the daily newsletter at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. All right. So setting this one up, the Wolves, of course, beat the Lakers on Friday to move to 2 games above 500. Winning this game puts them at 14-11. They're now, by the way, 1-1 against the Spurs this year, who have dropped to 13-13. And of course, extended absence for Greg Popovich. He's been out due to illness since I think the first game actually he missed was the Wolves lost to the Spurs back in late October, I believe, first week of November, maybe. Wolves win this one by 14. As mentioned, they led by as many as 18. That was early in the fourth quarter. They had early the third quarter. They built their big lead in the second. They were up by 15 at halftime, and it really did take kind of a recalibration late in this game for the Wolves to ultimately pull away. This wasn't like I think it was technically wire to wire. I believe the Wolves led the entire game, but it wasn't complete and utter dominance. It ultimately was a dominant win, but it took a bit. They came out with really impressive energy and really impressive activity level. I'm sure. Now, Friday against the Lakers, they were a bit rusty. Both teams were rusty after having a 4-day layoff. There were a lot of shots that were short from both teams, which is funny. You would expect that to be an issue if a team's playing, third game in 4 nights or whatever, back to back, because the legs go, right? Well, these guys apparently weren't quite in game shape on Friday last week. Neither team was. And I wonder if the Wolves made it a point hey, we've got another 3 days off. We don't play again until Thursday. Let's play really, really hard. Not that they don't always want to play hard, but let's really come out strong against this young, long, athletic, kind of rising Spurs team on Sunday and punch them in the mouth first and make a statement. And they did. The Timberwolves activity level was off the charts early. Jaden McDaniels throughout the game, and we'll talk a lot about Jaden on the show today, but I thought Jaden actually set the tone early. And this started certainly Friday against the Lakers, but you can even go back further than that. Jaden started playing very well kind of right when this winning streak started. Go back to the last game the Wolves lost before they've won. They obviously lost that Warriors game last Sunday, but they've won 6 out of 7. So the last game they lost before that was the NBA Cup game against the Kings that they lost by 11. Jaden was scoreless. had 4 fouls, was in some foul trouble, 0 for 3 in 24 minutes. The next night, he scored 11 points, had 5 assists, and was good defensively against the Clippers. A bit of a quieter game against the Lakers the next time out, but the Wolves won easily. He didn't have to play much late. Played really well in the next, actually, he had double-figure scoring for the next 5 nights, including this game against the Spurs. Had 18, 9, and 5 with 2 blocks against the Lakers, and was awesome defensively in those Warriors games on the road. One was a win, one was a loss. And now in this game against the Spurs, Jaden McDaniels turns in, believe it or not, his first career double-double. Yes, he's in year 5. No, he's never missed any extended period of time due to injury, knock on wood. But I've talked about this since really his rookie year, or I guess more like his second, third year when he started to play more. Well, he actually played a lot more of the 4 under Ryan Saunders. But anyway, like he's never rebounded as well as he should, given his size, his athleticism, his length, how good he is defensively. Part of that is because he's always on the perimeter. He's generally defended at the point of attack, right? So he's further away from the rim. But he had a little bit of that Andrew Wiggins in him where he would float and he wouldn't get those in-between rebounds. He would either leak out too early or he would, I mean, that was usually what would happen, or he just wouldn't, he would kind of linger on the perimeter. He wouldn't do anything decisive on the glass. We're seeing a little bit more of that. It's certainly not fixed, but the rebound rate for him is improving. We'll talk more about that probably later in the week. We've again got 3 days here before the Wolves play again. But his first career double-double plus 4 steals. He's got 9 steals in his last 2 games now. 9 steals in his last 2 games. And he has 30 points on 21 shots in his last 2 games. 4 of 7 outside the arc in his last 2 games. And a total of 20 rebounds over his last 2 games. So said another way, he's averaging 15 and 10 with 4.5 assists in his last 2 games. Is Jaden McDaniels. He's been fantastic, and he set the tone early in this game. Both ends of the floor. There was a sequence where I think he scored on one end, I think he had a stop. Then he knocks down a 3 from the slot, the right slot on the other end. Then he and Rudy kind of tandem block. I think Rudy got credit for the block, but he was a big part of forcing Wemby into Rudy Gobert for the stop on the defensive end. Comes back down and gets an assist in the open floor in a 2-on-1 situation. A very nice pass that leads to a bucket in transition. So he basically accounted for what was a 5-0 run, had a part in plays on both ends of the floor, twice on each side of the floor. Did McDaniels. So really strong early effort from McDaniels, and it extended throughout the game, but it set the tone early for the Wolves. And that, I think, again, must have been like, I'm sure the coaching staff was like, hey guys, we don't play a game again until Thursday. We've got a little bit of time off here. Let's play hard. Let's run these guys out of their own gym. And they did, as much as this Wolves, not that they wanted to pick up the pace necessarily, because the Wolves, shouldn't at times. Actually, it was partly what contributed to the Spurs comeback was the actual pace of play. I just mean playing hard. I just mean being energetic, getting the 50-50 balls, etc., which they did do. They forced 19 Spurs turnovers and scored 30 points off of those 19 turnovers, and they actually had 4 more fast break points than the Spurs, which coming into this game I would have told you was very unlikely to happen. They also barely out-rebounded the Spurs. They got to the line more frequently, which was almost entirely in the second half in this game. I think they only had 4 first-half free throws, the Wolves did. But, again, the energy level to me is like the headline here, is how hard the Wolves played and the tone being set by Jaden McDaniels. Again, the Wolves did get up. I think it was 16 was their biggest lead in the second quarter. They got up 18 early in the third. Things got sloppy in the third quarter. They started to gamble a little bit on defense and get greedy, trying to get those fast break points. Anthony Edwards lost Harrison Barnes a couple of times for some open 3-point shots. There was a possession in the middle of the third quarter where the Wolves gave up 5 offensive rebounds on one possession. Seriously. And that is basically like it's happening right in front of our eyes, right? We see this kind of third quarter. The Spurs are a pretty good third quarter team. The Wolves have had their problems, and you saw the Spurs kind of push back a little. They made it a 15-point game, 14-point game. And then it's like missed 3 from Champagnie, Sochan offensive rebound. Wemby missed 3, Sochan offensive rebound. Chris Paul missed 3, Champagnie offensive rebound. Gobert blocks Wemby. Wemby gets his own rebound, misses a shot. Champagnie gets another offensive rebound, and ultimately Harrison Barnes knocks down a corner 3. It's an 11-point game. And right then, I was actually surprised that Chris Finch didn't call a timeout then. But instead, the Wolves turned it over. Wemby scores on the other end. Then Wemby blocks Ant. Then Conley turns it over again. The next possession, Champagnie hits a three. Finally, the Wolves call timeout. They're only up 6. And this was like, it could have gone sideways, but the Wolves stabilized things. I want to talk a little bit about how they did that. And then we'll close the show here in a little bit with individual studs and duds. So all that is upcoming here next. Today's episode of Lockdown Wolves is sponsored by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY in uninvested cash, be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. A rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Today's episode of Lockdown Wolves is also sponsored by our friends at BetterHelp. Look, it's still the holiday season, of course, obviously. Big holidays coming up here the next couple of weeks. Of course, we're kind of a little past midway between Thanksgiving and Christmas. This time of year is the perfect time of year to just kind of snuggle up, get cozy. I'm a big fan of doing that. I love when it's cold outside. I love snow, at least this time of year, right? Hot chocolate, whatever, movies, of course, watching sports. It's the best way to be cozy and bring yourself some comfort. And look, a really good way to bring yourself some real comfort could be therapy. Therapy is a great way to bring yourself comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes, which after New Year's, there's a bit of that, it's still cold out, but you don't have the holidays to look forward to. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, consider giving BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockdownNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockdownNBA. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what the Wolves did when they found themselves with their lead up to or down to only 6 midway point in the third quarter. Like, this was I did the kind of blow by blow here a minute ago, but this was an 18-point game. And in like 3 minutes, it was down to 6. The Wolves called a timeout. The Spurs actually got it down to 3 after a bit of a back and forth. Randle splits a pair of free throws, and then Ant makes a tough shot. The Wolves defense finally shows back up, and they go back and forth. It mostly stabilizes by the end of the quarter. The Wolves are up 6 going to the fourth quarter. And this was really it was a well-timed timeout by Chris Finch. I thought maybe it was a possession or two late, as I said a minute ago. But it allowed their defense to kind of recalibrate. And the Spurs didn't get anything easy for the rest of the quarter. Yeah, they scored a little bit. And again, it did get down to 3 a couple of different times. But the Wolves did enough offensively, and they slowed things down overall to allow themselves to get back to a 6-point lead going to the fourth quarter. And it was really, again, about keeping control of the situation. Now, the fourth quarter, the Wolves definitely took control of this game. The lead quickly ballooned. The Wolves didn't allow a bucket in the first basically 4 minutes. 8:09 was the first time the Spurs scored, the 8:09 mark in the fourth quarter. And ultimately, the Spurs, I know they scored 22 in the quarter. It was almost entirely garbage time points. The Spurs only had 7 points in the first 8 minutes of the fourth quarter. So with 4 minutes to play, when both teams sent in their reserves for garbage time, the Spurs only had 77 points. They scored 7 points in the first 8 minutes of the frame. And that was that. I mean, garbage time, the Spurs won that one. The Wolves, frankly, I think the reserves were trying too hard to just kind of get out in transition and get some, dunks and 3-pointers and stuff up on the rim. But the defense was a bit sloppy from the third unit, and that allowed the Spurs to get to 92 points in the game. But again, it was that the Wolves defense in the fourth quarter, how swarming they were. It was reminiscent of what they did in the first quarter of this game. And there were a couple Spurs had a couple of open shots that they just missed that went in and out. Wemby missed a couple of bunnies in the paint, but the Wolves missed some bunnies in the paint in the first half of this game. Minnesota should have had more than what they have at halftime, 52. They should have had more points than 52 at halftime. They missed some easy shots in the paint. So it goes both ways, and you need some of that good fortune because you're also going to have your share of plays that don't go your way over the course of a game and over the course of a season. And that's what happened here. Minnesota's defense was very impressive. I should note the matchups. The Wolves mostly, at least they came out with Julius Randle guarding Victor Wembanyama, and they had the idea there obviously being you can then have Rudy guard the paint. You could play him. It's a little bit like what they've done, what they did against Denver last year, right? Where Cat guarded Jokic and Rudy, I guess they did it against Denver this year too. And then Rudy can kind of guard the paint. And he was guarding Jeremy Sohan, who's not a consistent offensive threat. He did put up 17 and 15 on 7 to 10 shooting in this game, but it was activity, right? It was offensive glass. It was just being all over the place. The Wolves forced Wemby to take 20 shots to get his 20 points. And he turned it over 4 times. He was fantastic, don't get me wrong. But I think the Wolves' strategy of putting Randle on Wemby and Rudy on Sohan made a lot of sense. It worked in this game. Now, Ant mostly had Harrison Barnes. He lost him at times in this one. The Wolves kind of switched off the Chris Paul matchup. He was not effective. He did have 9 assists, but he had no points on 0 of 5 shooting and 3 turnovers for Chris Paul. But I thought the Wolves' defensive approach was good. And outside of that stretch where they couldn't rebound in the third quarter, the defense was really good for the Wolves once again. And the way that they played the matchups, the game plan was really good. Offensively, it's not like they had to try and do anything crazy, but they ran more set plays, especially early in the game as they built this lead, as they scored 28 in the first quarter, which was their best quarter if you take out some of the garbage time and stuff in the fourth quarter. And there was a lot of Ant creating, and Ant hit some tough mid-range shots. He, again, took maybe a couple more mid-range shots than you like to see him take, but he was overall pretty efficient, and they ended up with a lot of lob opportunities for Rudy. He missed some easy shots, as I alluded to earlier. It wasn't all Rudy, but Rudy definitely missed some easy ones. But, again, they were generating those looks, and that to me was just it's always good when the Wolves run a few more set plays, when they have a little bit more structure to what they're trying to do. Before I get to individual studs and duds, I just want to point this out. I clearly have a love-hate relationship with individual game plus minus for individual players because it can be so noisy, and there's a bit of confirmation bias there. But this is one of those where, like, watching the game, I didn't feel like anybody would have a particularly high or low plus minus, except for maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who did have the game's best, by the way. He was great, and we'll talk more about him in a moment, and shame on me for not talking about him much yet. The Wolves' 3 bench guys. It's something we've talked. I should preface it by, if you're not a regular listener, or you haven't listened to a bunch of shows here recently, first of all, thank you for listening to this show, and please consider listening daily. We do shows Monday through Friday. But I've talked a lot about the lineups and how basically all the Wolves' best lineup combinations feature the 3 bench guys. Naz Reid, Donte DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Those 3 guys are basically in all the Wolves' really good lineups. And in this game, they're the only 3 players that had a better plus-minus mark than a +9. Ant was a +9. Nobody else was better than a +9 besides those 3 guys. And they were all a +15 or greater. They only won this game by 14. All the starters were between a +4 and a +9. Donte DiVincenzo was a +15. Naz Reid was a +26. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a +28 in this game. A +28. So once again, it's those 3 guys off the bench that were arguably the Timberwolves' best 3 all-around players or had the greatest impact on them ultimately winning this game. Really impressive performances from all 3 of those guys. And I want to talk a lot more about Nickeil here in a minute because I'll hit him as part of the studs and duds. But just like this is a 1-game snapshot of what they've been doing all season. Those 3 guys and the way Chris Finch staggers his lineups, or his rotations, I should say, have been super impressive. And this one single game snapshot is a really good example of that. All right, let's close by doing individual studs and duds. We'll do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Monday Night Football, there are 2 NFL games tonight. Of course, Vikings host the Bears. That's a 7:00 game. The Vikings are favored by a full 7 at home against the Bears tonight, which, of course, I think the Vikings will win this game. The full 7 it feels a bit dicey. If it were 6.5, I'd feel better about it. But the full 7 is maybe a little scary if you want to go for the Vikings in this one. The other game is the 7:30 game. That's Falcons at Raiders, which is certainly less intriguing. But actually, it's a lot less intriguing. But it's fantasy football playoffs, right? If you play fantasy football, you'd be interested in that game. And also, of course, if you're playing on FanDuel, there's a lot of intrigue here too as well. Falcons are favored by 5.5 on the road at Vegas, who's on like their third string quarterback this season, or I guess however you want to frame whatever's going on with their quarterback position. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can find both games on there. And of course, you can get a hunch in the middle of the game and check out everything live on FanDuel. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's do individual studs and duds from this one. Let's start with Jaden. I mean, like I already talked about Jaden quite a bit to lead the show, but let's start there. Jaden had 12 points on 4 of 10 shooting. Knocked down his only 2 3-point attempts and his only 2 free throw attempts. 11 rebounds, 4 steals, 1 assist. He also, by the way, had 4 offensive rebounds among those 11 rebounds. And those 4 steals, only 1 turnover and only 1 foul committed. He ended up only needing to play 28 minutes because of how much the Wolves led by in this game. Really strong Jaden game. And I'll say again, his first career double-double, which says a lot about Jaden, both his potential and how well he's played in this game and over the last, call it 2 weeks, and also some of the shortcomings he's had over the first 4+ seasons of his career. Now is the time. There's been a couple of moments like this in the past where we've said, look, if Jaden can do XYZ moving forward more consistently, we'd be talking about, a borderline all-star type player. And last year he broke through and got all defensive second team, which was great. There's been moments this year where it hasn't quite felt that impressive defensively for Jaden, but the last couple of weeks he's looked every bit that part, and he's not been a negative offensively, which is often what he's been, quite frankly, over the course of his career. Been much better of late, and that work on the glass is super important from Jaden McDaniels. Anthony Edwards talked only a little bit about him earlier. He had 26 points. It did end up taking him 21 shots to get there, but he was 10 of 21, 3 of 7 on threes. We saw both the volume and the percentages kind of in line with where he's been, but just 3 of 7 and only 3 free throw attempts, because once again, a lot of mid-range stuff from Anthony Edwards in this game. He did it well. 26 on 21 shots is fine, especially with only 1 turnover. He had 5 rebounds, which is a nice number in 28 minutes. 2 assists, only the 1 turnover for Ant. He was really good in this game. He was better than he's been. The last few times out, he's had some rocky performances, but this was a strong Anthony Edwards game, I thought. And then my third stud is Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Nickeil had 17. It did take him 15 shots to get there. He was only 2 of 8 on threes. He took some tough 3-point shots in this game from above the break that just kind of felt like a little bit weirdly forced, but all that to say, he was fantastic. As I said at the end of the last segment, plus 28 in 24 minutes for Nickeil, which is so hard to do. 6 of 15 shooting, 2 of 8 on threes, 3 of 3 at the line, 3 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals. There was a possession early in the game, which I thought was a pretty good kind of microcosm of the Nickeil experience, which was, I can't remember. I don't think he got the steal. Maybe he did. I think he did. Yeah, he got the steal. Went to try and throw it down on somebody in transition. Almost got fouled. It wasn't called. He missed the dunk, left it short. Same possession, the offensive rebound, the ball ends up back in Nickeil's hands in the corner, and he knocks down a corner 3. That's the Nickeil experience, and that's kind of a microcosm of his season. Breakneck pace, a bit of a wrecking ball, misses a dunk. We've seen him miss a couple shots in the open floor at the rim here recently, but then he knocks down the corner 3, and overall has a really positive impact. Yeah, he missed some shots. Yeah, he took some questionable shots. Somehow was second on the team in field goal attempts in this game and only played 24 minutes, less minutes than all of his starters and Nasrid. So he's 7th on the team in minutes, but 2nd in field goal attempts. But he was great. Like he was the wrecking ball that they needed in this game. This game suited Nickeil Alexander-Walker's talents and what he brings to the table. A really strong Nickeil performance, to be sure. I don't really have any duds. Like I talked earlier about the plus minuses of DiVincenzo and Naz Reid. Neither one of those guys actually played particularly well. Naz was 1 of 10 from the field, 0 of 4 outside the arc. Dante was 1 of 5 from outside the arc. So combined, they went 4 for 17 from the field and 1 of 9 on 3-point attempts. But they also combined for 13 rebounds, for 5 assists, and only 1 turnover. So Nickeil did a lot of the scoring, and of course, they're on the floor with other guys who score. This wasn't like a prolific offensive game for the Wolves. I mean, it's hard to be prolific offensively against Wemby, who, by the way, had 7 blocks in this game, as Wemby will do. The Wolves shot only 40% as a team and 34% outside the arc, only 35 3-point attempts, 14 to 16 at the free throw line, which definitely helped their cause as they tried to pull away in this one. They did have 14 offensive rebounds and gave the Spurs a bit of their own medicine on the glass in this game. I mentioned the 21 turnovers they forced from San Antonio, and they had 11 steals, the Wolves did. Jaden, of course, had 4. Both Nickeil and Julius Randle had 2 steals apiece. Julius Randle, by the way, if I had to pick a dud, I actually would probably pick him over Naz or Dante because I think their activity off the bench was super important. Julius had just 11 points on 11 shots in this game, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, a couple of turnovers. He did have a block. I would call this an uneven performance from Julius Randle. He never really felt like he had a rhythm. He did have, I think he threw 1, maybe 2 nice passes to Rudy Gobert. I think 2. I think 1 was a bounce pass, 1 was a lob. He also at one point stole a pass that was intended for Rudy, I think from either Conley or Dante. So it still is a bit clunky, but you can see Randle Gobert kind of trying to work through these things, right? I think uneven is the best word to describe it. He wasn't actively bad in this game, which is usually what I reserve the duds for. But I guess if I had to pick one, I would pick Julius Randle because of the unevenness of his performance. Overall, this weekend was really encouraging from the Wolves to see them beat the Lakers in a game where they didn't have their best, and obviously LeBron didn't play, but the Lakers, gave them a fight on Friday. Anthony Davis was really good. The Wolves ultimately pulled away in that one. This game, they came out strong, which is great to see. There was a mid-game lapse, as there often is. I mean, not just to the Wolves, it's the NBA, right? The Spurs have Wemby. They're a good team. They're a 500 team right now, more than a quarter of the way through the season. But the Wolves pushed back on the road and ultimately still won by 14. Like it's hard to put together a better blueprint unless they had just completely buried them. But again, it's good to see the resiliency for the Wolves that they were able to push back when the Spurs pushed back themselves in the third quarter. And I think that's a really encouraging sign for the Wolves here moving forward. Wolves are now 14-11. We'll talk more about the West standings on tomorrow's show. Next up is the Knicks. Karl-Anthony Towns and the Knicks come to town on Thursday night. That's a TNT game. An 8:30 Central tip, so a late Thursday night tip, the Thursday before Christmas. Should be a lot of fun at Target Center. And then Steph Curry and Golden State are back. I shouldn't say back. I guess they've only played them on the road this year. They're at Target Center on Saturday night. That's this coming Saturday night, a 7 p.m. tip. So a pair of really fun home games here leading into a Christmas week road trip at Atlanta, and then on Christmas Day at Dallas, Christmas afternoon, which will be a ton of fun. All right, that's all we have for you today here on the show. Later this week, we'll break down a bunch of different things as we lead into Thursday's game against the Knicks. Of course, we'll preview that game on Thursday. The show's the next couple of days. We'll break down after these wins this weekend where the Wolves offense and defense sit. We'll talk a little bit about Anthony Edwards. I did some shot selection stuff on him last week, but I think I'm going to go a layer deeper with Ant, and we'll talk, of course, more about some lineups and peek ahead to what the Wolves have upcoming, this is a really difficult stretch for the Wolves over the next couple of weeks. We'll talk a bit more about that too and give some predictions here for the upcoming games. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, you can subscribe to the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.